Uh, First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody. This is our fifth colloquium for the NEH grant this year. My name is Kerry Lane. I'm the project investigator. Today we have a really wonderful and creative writing workshop which will be facilitated by Dr. Joel Kuszai of the Department of English. Dr. Kuszai is a scholar in political and cultural rhetoric as well as poetry and poetics. Today's focus will be the African American experience. And when it comes to genocide and organized hate, I think as Americans our tendency is to think towards Europe or Africa when it comes to the literature of destruction or genocide. But America itself does have a history with this, and this is a topic we're going to get into today, specifically the African American experience. So this is going to be a poetry writing workshop. And the goal will be to actually capture the work you do in this workshop and exhibit it in the gallery. Okay, we're going to have an exhibit on April 16th, 2015, which will feature your work, which we will begin today. So Dr. Kuszai will take you through this process. It is an honor to have him here. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Joel Kuszai.
Thank you, Kerry.
You're welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. It is an honor. I'm going to walk us through a few things today, and I'm going to start off with a couple of poems, not of my own, of some things to listen to and to talk about, just to kind of get you oriented to where I come from in terms of the way that I look at poetry. And I'm going to ask you some questions about how you look at it, what you think of it, and then I have some larger questions that motivate what we're going to do today. And believe me, I don't have a lot of answers. I have a series of questions and a series of activities which are designed to kind of perform a kind of a process of disruption, to use a kind of a buzzword. A disruption of not only maybe what's out there in the larger world of literary understanding and historical knowledge, but also disruption of maybe where you might be familiar. And so I'm going to take you maybe some places you haven't been in terms of your own process of thinking and writing. And a lot of people may feel like, hey, I can't write, I don't want to write poems. I don't have, that's really not going to be an issue, because the poems you're going to kind of, you're going to be an assist on writing a poem, but the poems will be kind of generated in here. And I'll take you through that, but let me kind of get going on a couple things. First, I want to warm up with, I want to show you a poem that some of you may know, and if you don't, you should know. It's an important poem by Tupac Shakur, and The Rose That Grew from the Concrete. And I begin with that because I believe that it's a metaphor for a number of things, and a lot of people will say that and talk about that. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from the concrete when no one else even cared. I think, to me, that's an important poem to signal what we're going to do here today. On the one hand, I love the image. I think a lot of people love that image, and it's an image that's been borrowed greatly. There's a number of reasons why I brought it in to start. One is, I think it is a great metaphor for kind of busting through hardness and coldness and difficulty and oppression, even, if you want to think of concrete as oppression. I also think that concrete is a kind of a composite, and that busting through is something that we're going to do today. And it may not even seem possible. The rose shouldn't be able to bust through the concrete, and yet it does. The other reason that I wanted to bring it in here is I'm going to play a poem for you by a guy who is on Broadway now playing Tupac in a show. I believe it has a similar title to this poem, but I haven't been there yet. I hope to get there to see it soon. And that's Saul Williams. And he's an important poet. I'm going to play a clip from a movie that's about 15 years old now. And so that's why I wanted to share that with you. I'm going to start also with something else. Charles Reznikoff is not an African-American poet, but an important writer who wrote a book called Holocaust. And for me, it's an important book for the methodology, not only the topic, which of course is relevant. And this poem, book-length poem, in fact, is constructed out of language entirely taken from the Nuremberg trials. And I share it with you. I'm going to play a piece from it because I think it demonstrates something about poetry that surprises a lot of people. and that is that you can take regular found language and turn it into a poem, doing very, very little to it, except, and this is the big question that I have for you, what is it that needs to be done? You find a block of language, and what is left to make it a poem? And I actually don't have it for you in text, although I do have the book, and I could have given it to you, but I want you to hear Charles Reznikoff read a section from it. This is from a University of Pennsylvania website called Penn Sound, which has a lot of amazing audio on it. We're really lucky to have any recordings of Reznikoff reading. And find the poem. I'm going to play a section. This is kind of random. This is from Ghettos.
I will now read a third extract. One of the SS men caught a woman with a baby in her arms. She began asking for mercy. If she were shot, the baby should live. She was near a fence between the ghetto and where Poles lived, and behind the fence were Poles ready to catch the baby. And she was about to hand it over when caught. The SS man took the baby from her arms and shot her twice, and then held the baby in his hands. The mother, bleeding but still alive, crawled up to his feet. The SS man laughed and tore the baby apart as one would tear a rag. Just then a stray dog passed, and the SS man stooped to pat it and took a lump of sugar out of his pocket and gave it to the dog.
So that's a poem, and the words come directly from the Nuremberg trials, word for word. And it's in the poetry community that I'm a part of and have been a part of since I was in graduate school. He's an important poet, for a number of reasons. And the biggest one for us today is that he took a source text. He took a source text and made it into a poem by breaking it into lines, and maybe, possibly, most importantly, by making key selections from that source text. That's the hard part, is that he had to read a lot of prose that must have been as unbearable as that to get to the parts that he wanted to isolate and raise up and say, this is a poem. And we're going to do something like that today. We're going to do a couple of things. That act of identifying the language is you. What you isolate, what you find, what you bring up from the source that you're looking at. Whatever the source is that you choose to say, I'm going to find a poem in here. That's the hardest part, is finding the text that you want to use as a source. And he had, of course, a lot of reasons for wanting to do that, and it is quite poignant and disturbing and upsetting and unreadable in times, as that is unlistenable in a way. All right, let me play you something else. Let's change the mood a little bit. This is Saul Williams from a 1998 movie called Slam. It's a great movie. I hate to give an advertisement for a movie, but it's a fantastic movie, and I'll give you a little summary of it briefly. It's set in the D.C. area, and it's about a guy who gets arrested for dealing drugs, and he's sort of framed. He's sort of messed up in the wrong place at the wrong time, and there's a shooting, and it's all too typical in some ways, kind of a story. And the author behind this text is a guy named Bones Malone, who's a writer for Vibe magazine now. But Bones Malone was at Rikers when they went to talk to him. Mark Levin, the director, went to Rikers to interview Bones Malone about his story. It's really Bones Malone's story. He was shot in the D.C. County Jail, and it was shot gonzo style, which means that they walked in there with cameras, and nobody knew what they were doing. The inmates in there were like, what's going on here? And there's a couple of, it's a great movie. You have to see the movie. But I'm going to play you a scene where Saul Williams, playing Ray, the main character in the movie, and again, it's a movie, it's a fictional movie, but the action is not, it's not acted. Saul Williams I didn't know Saul Williams as a poet until I saw this movie. And so I'll play you a couple of the poems from it rather quickly, and then I'm going to ask you some questions. This is from a prison yard scene, and then the second poem is set near the end of the movie when he's actually out, and giving a reading at a nightclub, and that's actually filmed in New York at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. And in any event, whoops, take a listen.
I stand on the corner of the block slinging amethyst rocks, drinking 40s of Mother Earth's private nectar stock, dodging cops, cause 50 be the 666, and I need a fix of that purple rain, the type of shit that drives membranes insane. Oh yeah, I'm in the fast lane, snorting candy yams that free my body and soul and send me like Shazam. Never question who I am, God knows, and I know God personally. In fact, he lets me call him me. Yeah, I'm serious, B. Doggone niggas plotted shit lovely, but the feds is also plotting me. They're trying to imprison my astrology, put our stars behind bars, our stars in stripes, using blood-splattered banners as nationalist kites. But I control the wind, that's why they call it the hawk. I am Horus, son of Isis, son of Osiris, worshipped as Jesus, resurrected like Lazarus. But you can call me lazy. Yeah, I'm lazy because I'd rather sit and build than work a plow field, worshipping a daily yield of cash green crops. Stealing us was the smartest thing they ever did. Too bad they don't teach the truth to their kids. Our influence on them is the reflection they see when they look into their minstrel mirror and talk about their culture. Their existence is that of a schizophrenic vulture. Yeah, there's no repentance. They are bound to live an infinite consecutive executive life sentence. So what are you bound to live, nigga? So while you're out there serving the time and I'll be in sync with the sun while you run from the moon. Life of the womb reflected by guns. Worship of moons, I am the sun, and we are public enemies number one. One.
If I could find the spot where truth echoes, I would stand there and whisper memories of my children's future. I would let their future dwell in my past so that I might live a brighter now. Now is the essence of my domain, and it contains all that was and will be. And I am as I was and will be, because I am and always will be that nigga. I am that nigga. I am that nigga. I am that timeless nigga that swings on pendulums like vines through minds of booby-trapped minds that are enslaved by time. I am the life that supersedes lifetimes, I am. It was me with serpentine hair and a timeless stare that with a mortal glare turned mortal fear into stone time capsules. They still exist as the walking dead, as I do, the original sufferhead, symbol of life and matriarchy, severed head, Medusa. I am that nigga. I am that nigga. I am that nigga. I am a Negro, yes, Negro. Negro from necro, meaning death. I overcame it, so they named me after it. And I be spitting at death from behind and putting kick me signs on its back, because I am not the son of clack, clack. I am before that. I am before. I am before. Before death is eternity. After death is eternity. There is no death. There's only eternity. And I be riding on the wings of eternity like, yeah, clack, clack. But my flight doesn't go undisturbed, because time makes dreams defer. And all of my time fears are turning my days into daymares. And I live daymares, reliving nightmares of once haunted my past. Clack, clack, time is beating my ass. And I be having dreams of chocolate-covered watermelons filled with fried chickens like piñatas, with little pickaninny sons and daughters standing up under them with big sticks and aluminum foil, hitting them trying to catch pieces of fallen fried chicken wings. And Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben are standing in the corners with rifles pointing at the heads of the little children. Don't shoot the children, I shout. Don't shoot the children, but they say it's too late. They've already been infected by time, but this shit is before my time. I need more time. But it's too late. They start shooting at the children and killing them, 1 by 1, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, 4 by 4, 5 by 5, 6 by 6. But my spirit is growing 7 by 7, faster than the speed of light, because light only penetrates the darkness that's already there, and I'm already there. I'm here at the end of the road, which is the beginning of the road beyond time, but where my niggas at?
Oh shit.
Oh shit, don't tell me my niggas got lost in time. My niggas are dying before their time. My niggas are serving unjust time. My niggas are dying because of time.
So that's Saul Williams, and that's those are two poems that are in an early book of his. What's that? S-A-U-L, Williams. And I've given you a handout, which you should make sure you pick up. And in that handout, we have the first poem, Amethyst Rocks. So I want you to take a look at that. And I have questions for you. How do you read those poems? How do you understand those poems? How do you react to them, I guess maybe is what I'm asking. What's your reaction to those poems? There's a lot of language in there that is upsetting, and there's a lot of imagery in there that's quite upsetting. How do you respond to that? You're curious about the guy's name. Interested. Any thoughts? The movie is worth seeing. The woman who appears in there is Sonia Sohn. She's the only other she's an actor. She's an actor also. Well, she's a poet, but she's a well-known poet. But most of the people in the movie are not actors. I want to show you one other thing. Open your booklet, and I want you to turn to the first poem. I'm going to put something else in the mix. There's some handouts. Make sure you pick them up.
Oh, thanks.
There's some over there, some here. Here, take that. This is by Phyllis Wheatley. And this poem is from the late 18th century. "'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there's a God, that there's a Savior too. Once I redemption neither sought nor knew. Some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train." Phyllis Wheatley was the first woman in the United States, first African-American woman to publish a book. She was taken from Africa and brought to the United States, the colonies, and lived quite well, and was educated, and was a renowned poet. And that poem is important for a number of reasons. I'm going to play you, well, let me ask you a question here first. And I want you to respond. I want you to shout out responses. What's poetry for? What is it for? What is poetry all about? Why do we even have it?
Expression.
Express your feelings, yes, expression. What else?
Creative.
What's that?
Creative.
For being creative, yeah, go with it. More. What else? What is a message? Excellent. What role does it play? Because that is all true. What role can it play? Any thoughts about that? I'm sorry?
What role can it play in what?
Well, in civic society, in life, your life. Why would we have poetry? Why do we even... Does anybody here read poems on their own?
It can have an impact on you.
Yeah, exactly. What kind of impact? Personal impact?
Yeah.
Emotion.
Emotional? What else? Spur you to action, perhaps? Some poems? And I think you find all of those things in the tradition of African American literature. In fact, it's such a broad tradition, it's really, really hard to generalize. I thought that I might be able to make some generalizations, and it's really, really difficult. It's not all poetry of conflict. There's a lot of poetry of uprising, if you will, and overcoming. That's not necessarily conflict. I don't know. I think Phyllis Wheatley's poem has conflict in it, but it's at a remove from that conflict. Shelley, the poet, Percy B. Shelley, described poets as the unacknowledged legislators of, or the unacknowledged legislators of the world. I find that compelling. But that's not for everybody. I know for my own self, poetry has been something that was quite personal. I would write poems and I would just sort of read them to myself and not share them with a lot of people. And I've done some sharing, but I would write poems and I would just like get in the bathtub and just read them over and over again when I needed to. Anybody in here write poems? Nobody in here writes poems? Susan, do you write poems? Occasionally. Me too. Me too. Well, one of the questions I have is what, looking back, might poetry have to do with history or the history of the African American experience? How might that come into play? So I listen to Saul Williams and I hear a lot of kind of residual concern, to put it mildly, about the experience. And there's a lot of imagery, especially in that second poem, of the kind of history of racism in our country and beyond. And in the first poem, Amethyst Rocks, there's a lot of there's a lot of, quite frankly, there's a lot of religious discourse filtered through that work. And he's quite angry in his presentational style. And I find that to be typical of a lot of contemporary younger writers, not only African-American writers, but a lot of younger writers are angry. That's not a universal, but certainly that's something you might say. And I think that's a criticism that's made of younger writers by people who are more established and older, is that anger is a turnoff, and the language is a turnoff, and that it's noisy. It's really noisy. And I remember, that cliche about rock and roll, it's like just noise. And I think that's a criticism that's made of hip hop by people who don't understand it, who aren't part of it, where maybe they want to hear the Rolling Stones or, what used to be noise. And so there's that question of intelligibility. Does that make sense to you? That something is intelligible to you because you're in the middle of it. And I think that comes up with even some of the more difficult words that Saul Williams and a lot of contemporary writers will use. And there's a great interview on YouTube between Dave Chappelle and Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou being the grand mother of literature in many ways, not just African American literature, but all literature in some ways. And they're debating the use of the N-word. And it's a compelling interview. If you've never heard it, you should go look it up. Because she's very critical, and he's trying to explain how younger people understand that. And they're never going to quite meet, but he's very reverential of her, as you would expect. And in any event, I'm curious about that noise. And so one of the things we're going to do today is we're going to go back and look at some history, and we're going to render it into noise and try to reclaim it. And I'm going to walk you through that because I think that doesn't even make any sense, what I just said. In other words, we're going to look at a story about something. And then we're going to back up, and we're going to turn it into noise, and we're going to try to revisit it. I'm going to play you one more thing, and then we're going to do our little exercise. And let me just say a couple of other things about that. As you all know, the history of the slave trade was a great tragedy, and one of the greatest. And the stories are not, I don't think, well known. A lot of the stories come from people who were colonizers or on that side, the traders themselves or people associated with them. And the stories that we have by people who were held captive and brought here are by and large people like Phyllis Wheatley, who were Christianized, taught English, and educated, and so that they were able to write. And I think that makes it difficult to look back. That's one of the struggles. So looking at it from my perspective, and this is why I'm here, frankly, is how can I read something from that far ago and get something direct experience? The people who directly experienced it are long gone. They're ghosts. They're ghosts in my world, and they're around, and they appear in weird places. And you find them bubbling up through Saul Williams and other writers, Tupac among them, for sure, and many, many others. And if you're interested, send me an email, and I can provide you a list of PDFs that I've scanned for my poetry class. And so there's just a huge field of text that one can look at. But it's a big curiosity. When you don't have direct experience, how could you write about it? I'm going to say today, hey, everybody, we're going to write poems out of the middle passage. And you're going to be like, but I wasn't there. And I could pull up pictures, and I've thought about it, and maybe I should, of what the drawings were of the ships. And most of us have seen them. And I'm not sure I want to do that. I'm not sure that that's necessary. I could describe for you the size of the space that the people were in, 3 feet high. In fact, there's a guy who's not here, Professor. Too bad. I was going to ask him to volunteer to get under the table for a while and stay there during the session. And if he shows up, that's where he'll be. Because I think that experience is really, really, it's not even, it's incomprehensible, frankly, to go through that. So how would we write poems of that? Guessing? Imagining? How are we going to do that? How are we going to write poems of that? So I'm going to show you that. And we have a couple of examples. That poem by Phyllis Wheatley is an important one. It's a famous, famous, famous poem. And I'm going to play you another one, and it's in your booklet. And I'd like you to read along. And one of the reasons I'm playing for you is that I want it to sink in a little bit right before we do our activity. And this is Robert Hayden's Middle Passage. Robert Hayden is another very, very important 20th century writer. one of my favorites. And this is him reading, and again, it's quite a gift to have this. This is also online at the Poetry Foundation.
People have asked for it, and some studies have been made, and perhaps now it's time for me to read this poem. It's long, and it has different voices in it, and I'm not always up to it. I think, though, that I think I can get through it tonight. I wrote it, back in the 40s, when there was very little interest in this kind of subject matter. I read for 2 or 3 years and had to work out a form for it, and I finally did. And here is the poem, which is about the slave trade. Middle passage. Jesus, Estrella, Esperanza, mercy. Sails flashing to the wind like weapons. Sharks following the moans, the fever, and the dying. Horror, the corpuscent, and compass rose. Middle passage. Voyage through death to life upon these shores. 10th April, 1800. Blacks rebellious, crew uneasy. Our linguist says their moaning is a prayer for death, ours and their own. Some try to starve themselves. Lost 3 this morning leap with crazy laughter to the waiting sharks, sang as they went under. Desire, adventure, Tartar, Anne. Standing to America, bringing home black gold, black ivory, black seed. Deep in the festering hole thy father lies. Of his bones New England pews are made. Those are altar lights that were his eyes. Jesus, Savior, pilot me over life's tempestuous sea. We pray that thou wilt grant, O Lord, safe passage to our vessels, bringing heathen souls unto thy chastening. Jesus, Savior. 8 bells, I cannot sleep, for I am sick with fear. But writing eases fear a little, since still my eyes can see these words take shape upon the page, and so I write as one would turn to exorcism. 4 days scudding, but now the sea is calm again. Misfortune follows in our wake. Like sharks, our grinning tutelary gods. Which one of us has killed an albatross? A plague among our blacks, ophthalmia, blindness. And we have jettisoned the blind to no avail. It spreads, the terrifying sickness spreads. Its claws have scratched sight from the captain's eyes, and there is blindness in the forecastle. And we must sail 3 weeks before we come to port. What port awaits us? Davy Jones or home? I've heard of slavers drifting, playthings of wind and storm and chance. Their crews gone blind, the jungle hatred crawling up on deck. Thou who walked on Galilee. The opponent further saith, the Bella J left the Guinea coast with cargo of 500 blacks and odd for the barracoons of Florida, that there was scarcely room between decks for half the sweltering cattle stowed spoon-fashion there, that some went mad of thirst and tore their flesh and sucked the blood, that crew and captain lusted with the comeliest of the savage girls kept naked in the cabins, that there was one they called the Guinea Rose, and they cast lots and fought to lie with her, that when the boatswain piped all hands, the flames spreading from starboard already were beyond control, the Negroes howling and their chains entangled with the flames, that the burning blacks could not be reached, that the crew abandoned ship, leaving their shrieking negresses behind, that the captain perished drunken with the wenches. Further deponent saith not, Pilot, oh, pilot me. Aye, lad, and I have seen those factories, Gambia, Rio Pongo, Calabar. have watched the artful Mongols setting traps of war, wherein the victor and the vanquished were caught as prizes for our barracoons. Have seen the nigger kings whose vanity and greed turned wild black hides of Felata, Mandingo, Igbo crew to gold for us. And there was one, King Anthracite we called him, fetish face beneath French parasols of brass and orange velvet, impudent mouth whose cups were carven skulls of enemies, would honor us with drum and feast and conjo and palm oil glistening wenches skilled in love, and for 10 crowns that shone with paste, red calico and German silver trinkets, would have the drums talk war and send his warriors to burn the sleeping villages and kill the sick and old and lead the young in coffles to our barracoons. 20 years a traitor, 20 years, for there was wealth aplenty to be harvested from those black fields, and I'd be trading still, but for the fevers melting down my bones. Shuttles in the rocking loom of history, the dark ships move, the dark ships move, their bright ironical names like jests of kindness on a murderer's mouth. Plow through thrashing glister toward Fata Morgana's lucent, melting shore. Weave toward New World littorals that are mirage and myth and actual shore. Voyage through death, voyage whose chartings are unlove. A charnel stench, a fluvium of living death, spreads outward from the whole, where the living and the dead, the horribly dying, lie interlocked, lie foul with blood and excrement. Deep in the festering hold thy father lies. The corpse of mercy rots with him. Rats eat love's rotting, gelid eyes. But oh, the living look at you with human eyes, whose suffering accuses you, whose hatred reaches through the swill of dark to strike you like a leper's claw. You cannot stare that hatred down or chain the fear that stalks the watches and breathes on you its fetid, scorching breath, cannot kill the deep, immortal human wish, the timeless will. But for the storm that flung up barriers of wind and wave, the Amistad, senores, would have reached the Porto Principe in 2-3 days at most. But for the storm, we should have been prepared for what befell. Swift as the puma's leap it came. There was that interval of noiseless calm, filled only with the waters and the rigging's usual sound. Then sudden movement, blows and snarling cries, and they had fallen on us with machete and marlin spike. It was as though the very air, the night itself, were striking us. Exhausted by the rigors of the storm, we were no match for them. Our men went down before the murderous Africans. Our loyal Celestino ran from below with gun and lantern, and I saw, before the cane knife's blinding flash, Cinquez, that surly brute who calls himself a prince, directing, urging on the ghastly work. He hacked the poor mulatto down, and then he turned on me. The decks were slippery when daylight finally came. It sickens me to think of what I saw, of how these apes threw overboard the butchered bodies of our men, true Christians all, like so much jetsam. Enough, enough, the rest is quickly told. Cinquez was forced to spare the two of us, you see, to steer the ship to Africa, and we, like phantoms doomed to rove the sea, voyage east by day and west by night, deceiving them, hoping for rescue, prisoners on our own vessel, till at length we drifted to the shores of this your land, America, where we were freed from our unspeakable misery. Now we demand, good sirs, the extradition of Cinquez and his accomplices to La Habana. And it distresses us to know there are so many here who seem inclined to justify the mutiny of these blacks. We find it paradoxical indeed that you whose wealth, whose tree of liberty are rooted in the labor of your slaves, should suffer the august John Quincy Adams to speak with so much passion of the right of slaves to kill their lawful masters, and with his Roman rhetoric weave a hero's garland for Cinques. I tell you that we are determined to return to Cuba with our slaves, and there see justice done. Cinques, or let us say the prince, Cinques shall die. The deep, immortal human wish, the timeless will. Cinques, its deathless primaveral image, life that transfigures many lives. Voyage through death to life upon these shores.
What do you think? What do you notice about that poem? What else?
Something about a ship.
Yes, it's about the ship. Which ship? You've heard the story? Some of you may have seen the movie. The Amistad. Yes. It's the story of the Amistad Rebellion. And I want you to read it again at some point. I hope that you will. You can look it up and listen to it. What's important about it for our purposes is that it mixes historical text with poetry. It's a combination of voices. It's not a single voice reading in there or speaking in there. And I think a lot of people are not used to poetry that has multiple voices in it. It's actually quite common. And if you look at it, it's direct historical language mixed with verse. There's biblical language. And it's quite graphic. What I want you to do right now is take one of the blue books and open up to the first page, and we're going to do something. You've got your the handout that I gave you. Everybody got a handout? Because we're going to do a couple of things. And here's where you got to hold on. Hold on. Hold on. This is where it gets different. I want you to open up to the prose text here. The interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano. And I want you guys to break into, I'm going to give you some numbers. Okay, are you leaving?
Yeah.
You have to leave? All right, well, those who are going to leave can go, and then the rest of us will do this.
This is every Wednesday?
What's that?
This is every Wednesday?
No. So I want you to go around and quickly count into fours, okay? Not necessary. Just put it over there. So you're one. You're one. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Austin, you're a 4, and go around there, please. Are you guys ready? All right, you ready? I want all the ones to do something. I want you to take out your pen and take a look at this text. All the ones. Everybody ready? Pick a number between 1 and 9 and just keep it to yourself. You got it? All the 2s, I want you to pick a number between 1 and 9. I'm going to give instructions for each number. Okay? In fact, let's just do 1 and 2, and the 3s can do what we'll do the 3s or 1s, and the 4s or 2s. I'll make it simpler, okay? All the 1s, I want you to take that number and circle, and you're going to look at this text, and I want you to circle. If you picked a 4, you would go to the 4th word and circle it, and repeat that, and just keep circling it. And just do it quickly. This is just a machine, so just do it. The 2s, I want you to do something different. I want you to look at each word And if it's a bisyllabic word, if it's more than one syllable, I want you to cross it out until you get to your number. So if you pick 3, any word that's not the, and, but, or something like that, one syllable, cross it out until you get to the third one. So if it was a 3, the first, object, crossed it out, saluted, crossed it out, arrived, you would circle. All right, go ahead and do that really quickly. Go as far through it as you can. Try it out. It's okay. I know it's funny. Try it out. Anybody want to read what they have? Austin, come on up. Thank you. Just read it any way you like. Just get the words out in the room, really loud.
Cannot sick, writing little. Eyes, words, the. I turn days. See follows like tutelary. Us and it. Sickness claws the blindness. Weeks come. Slavers of chance. Blind up.
Are you sure you didn't just write that?
No, that was all that's random.
Thank you. Anybody else want to follow Austin? He's maybe a tough act to follow, but. One of the things that I wanted to share with you, Edward Glissant, a writer of kind of post-colonial theory, has a quote about the slave ships. And he says, since speech was forbidden, slaves camouflaged the word under provocative intensity of the scream. No one could translate the meaning of what seemed to be nothing but a shout. It was taken to be nothing but the call of a wild animal. This is how dispossessed man organized his speech, by weaving it into the apparently meaningless texture of extreme noise. And I think that Austin did a great job of, maybe it was through the affect of his presentation. Anybody else want to try? Just reading what they have. It could be pretty plain. Well, I need a volunteer. Come on up. Thank you, sir.
The first which when I on the was the sea, and on a ship which was the writing at and for its. These filled me with astonishment, which was soon into terror when I was on board. I was immediately and tossed up to see if I were by some of the crew, and I was now that I had gotten a word of bad spirits, and that they were to kill me. Their two differing so much from ours, their long and they spoke, which was very from any I had ever. That's all I got.
Thank you. That was I was like in shock about that. What was your number? What did you do? What was your action on the text?
I picked, crossed out the syllabuses.
Interesting. That is really interesting. That is exactly the kind of thing I was expecting. Or hoping for, I should say, because I don't know what to expect. And these are experiments. This isn't necessarily, we don't know what we're going to get, do we? What did you think of that?
I was surprised that some of it was actually, some sentences actually matched up.
Yeah.
Like in the middle, when I was reading the middle part, it actually sort of spoke by itself.
It sort of spoke by itself. That's interesting. I have a theory in looking at this that the DNA of the text, if you will, what's behind it, behind the story, behind what gets piled on top of it with the kind of reacculturation, the language, the ideology, all of the changes, that something kind of bubbles up through it. These are the ghosts coming through, in my view, and I may be strange in that view, but I love that. I think that was great. Anybody else want to read and share? Then we're going to do a little bit more with it, and I want you to keep that, but we'll do a bit more with it. You want to come up? Thanks. Interesting.
Object my eye, the which writing is filled astonishment, soon terror, was bored immediately, tossed sea where some crew was that God enrolled spirits, they to their livering from long the spoke very, to indeed the fears moment. 10 had own have with to my meanest, my went round to for people description, every their dejection, I doubted fate.
Thank you. Excellent. Again, we're getting a, how do you react to that? Just what are you feeling from that? It's not narrative, it's not a story. What is it? It's a word pile, but how would you read that? Yeah.
I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
What were the different categories? Like, what were the different numbers?
Yeah, excellent question. What did you do?
I circled them from 1 to 10 and picked number 3.
Number 3, so every third word you picked? Excellent. And you did this.
Counted up to 3, and I crossed out the syllable, the words that had more than one syllable.
Except for every third one. Yeah. That's a hard one to, I think that, yeah, good. Austin, what did you do?
Oh, I had every 4. But every like 8th word, I picked in the 4.
Okay, interesting. All right.
Or I crossed it.
Anybody else want to share? Because we'll do a little bit more, but if anybody else wants to share, I think it's, one of the reasons to do this from my perspective is that you could analyze a text this way without necessarily following the story. And one of the ways you might do that is you kind of get these words and you might find patterns in word usage. And that might tell you something about the text that you might otherwise not get because you're captivated by the story and you wouldn't feel, for example, that certain types of words are coming up consistently, especially if you're, or the activity of removing a lot of mono or bisyllabic and multisyllabic words. You're almost creating an automatic poem because it's going to be like bum 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 and then a bum bum or whatever coming after that. And depending on how many syllables you picked, you might get something that you could control in a really rhythmical way. And I think that would be something you could play with in making a poem. And that is what maybe we do now. You have these words. I do think that some of these are keepable. I would think that you should keep them. Now, here's the challenging part. What do they need to be poems? What do you have? What would it need to be a poem? You have these words, and in some sense, that starts you off. That's a particular kind of poem where you have the first word of each line is sort of predetermined. An acrostic is what that's called. So it might go down like you put your name down the page. For me, it would be first word would start with a J, and so forth. But here you actually would start. You could potentially start each word, each line, with a word, or you might do something different. I also think that one of the principles here is kind of a remix, and so you might work with a partner and merge these texts together or go back to the original. And again, like we heard in the Haydn and in the Reznikov poem I played you at the beginning, find a section of a cluster, like a phrase that you like, and just put it right in there. Keep it exactly as it is. Just copy it word for word. And try to make something. Try it. Mitchell, I want you to try it. Try it. Yes. Try it. See what you can come up with. And see if you can make something with this. One of the things I think that it may ask you to do is to breathe back into it some sense of what you want to say. Do you want to say something? And you may not necessarily. But I'll read you something that some students, well, you can read it yourself, but this poem here by Dana and Shaina, well, they're in my class, and they did this exact activity, but they actually took it home, which is what I asked. I said, go home and find another text and mix it in, any way you like, word for word. You could take bits and pieces. You could perform a similar action and then synthesize it in somehow. And they went and looked at the Bible and identified sections on slavery and remixed that into what they found. And this is the poem they wrote. And they said that they wrote it collaborating using their phones. They wrote it through text. And they read it in our class. I was really taken by it. And I think it's a good example of, you could read this poem and not know that it was produced that way. And you'd have you might have who is this author? And a lot of poems, and you may not be accustomed to it, a lot of poems, it's not a poem about the author's life. It's words put together, it's an art form. And you could create sensibility that's not yours. Try if you can make something right now. Put some words together. All right, we're going to have a couple of readings. Anybody who would like to share, it would be great to have you. And then we'll close up. I'll make a couple of comments, and maybe Carrie would like to make a couple of comments.
My eyes that saluted, with astonishment been filled, will believe. A slave freely killed, horror at furnace, have borne in look, cargo of multitude. Extinguished they were, grief their own crying, together, when flogged they jumped.
Excellent. Yeah, I like that. That's great. Anybody else want to try sharing?
Voyage through death, sails flashing to, standing to America. Jesus, Savior, Pilot, over life's tempestuous, we pray 8 bells. I, with fear, has killed the albatross for the buckaroons. Some went mad, sucked the blood, burning blacks could, shrieking. Captain perished drunken. Pilot, oh pilot.
Whoa. Who would have thunk it? That's too much. Very good, thank you. Anybody else want to try sharing what you were able to produce? I know you're out there. Yay, Susan. Dr. Susan Jacobowitz, thank you.
This was pretty cool. I never got to do this. All right, so I made lists of every third word over one syllable, I think it was. Okay, I'll give it a shot. Spirits differing, ignorance, waiting, consternation, terror, horrors experienced, handled, flogged, wished preference, free condition.
Thank you. Any comments about what you've heard? Did you get anything from that? What's your reaction to it? Any off-the-cuff reactions? They seem, largely disconnected, but then there's something coming through.
I think they seem very emotional, especially compared to the original piece where there's just so much verbiage, Just such a big effort to get inside the experience, but this kind of distills it.
It distills it. Yeah, that's my feeling hearing them, is that it is a kind of a distillation. And it's strange because it's such a random word choice. I mean, if you went intentionally through looking, and I've tried this before, you intentionally look for the most evocative words. That's another way to do it. And you're intentionally going in and trying to identify the things that you want to raise up or rescue from that mass of verbiage. I think that's another way to proceed. That's equally as interesting, but you're really intentionally doing it, as opposed to here, it's an accident. I like the accident because I think it just reveals something that the text just can't help but evoke. The experience still comes through. It's spooky to me. That's why, to me, it's like this. It's ghostly. I don't know. Anybody else want to try reading? You want to try reading yours? You want to?
All right.
You don't have to, but if you want to. It'll be interesting to hear what you did with what you had, because what you had was good.
I don't know if it's as good as the last ones. But first, when I was on the sea, a ship was riding, and these filled me with astonishment, which was soon turned into terror. I was tossed on board by some of the crew. I was now in a world of bad spirits, and they were to kill me.
Thank you. Did you save the original one too?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Because I would love to see like the first section and then the second section. And it's almost like I'm getting chills thinking about how you read the first time, and then it's almost like that first one was really crazy, and then this guy put his words together. That's what look, the experience of that, going from how it first felt to hear you read it when it was really jumbled up, and then it's almost like a rebuilt speech.
You can even present it that way.
I would like that. I hope that you'll be willing to present that, because I thought it was phenomenal. And just that difference, that move from the experimental, and then you're going in, so you're kind of hammering out, I want to keep it, I want to own it again. And I think that's really, really important. That you're getting this thing, and it's passive in a way, like, and not the way you read it even, or the activity, you weren't necessarily passive, but it's sort of just happening. And then there's this reclamation going on that I think is super duper important. And coming back to the Tupac poem, that's the moment of the rose kind of blasting through what otherwise is just compressed. I mean, think about the concrete as that image of, what is concrete but sand and mortar and whatever concrete is made from, and it's just pressed down, and it's that compression. We're getting that distillation, and then when you come back in and say, no, I'm going to own this, that's you coming back in. I think that's to me why I like doing this, why I like it as an exercise, and I think we got to get to that stage. And those of you who don't want to share now, or even if you do, I hope that you'll press on to that moment of rebuilding, that you're kind of, things crumble, and through our activity, and we're kind of making this noise. And then when we reclaim it, it's no longer, we're making it intelligible again, and we're re-owning. I love that. I love that. That was amazing. Anybody else want to share? Here she comes. See, she's got some poet in her, I can tell.
Object my writing, filled astonishment, soon terror, bored immediately, world spirits, from long thy spoke, my fears moment ten, to every their deduction. I doubted fate, fell fainted, I recovered, black me believed by men's looks, such portion liquor of wine being him.
Thank you. Can I ask you, what did you do to that? What was your action in coming back to it?
I don't know, like, it's a lot of feeling, and I just added 2 words, and everything else was...
Oh, it's the same except for 2 words? Interesting. What were the 2 words you added?
Just added and there.
Like just only once and?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Very cool. Anybody else want to read? Nobody else?
How can I get these poems to you so we can consider them for the exhibit? Can you put your email on?
Yeah, can I type it out here somewhere?
So those of you who didn't read, it's important if you email your poem or whatever you worked on today to Dr. Kuszai, type it out and email it to him. That way we can include it in the exhibit in the spring. So Dr. Kuszai is going to put his email, and if you could write it down in your blue books or wherever you wrote your poem, all you need to do is type it out and email it to him. And then, there we go. The spelling.
The typography if you want.
Oops.
If you want to do it
Yes.
with the layout.
You can play with the layout, sure.
So if you pull up a list of words in the poem.
Yeah.
Pull that from
Include your list of words, yes, and then it's a great idea.
Really cool.
And that way we can exhibit both, that way we can see where you came from. Yeah, great idea. You see that, everybody?
Well, I don't know. I'm not really very good with words here.
Once you write it, I'll enlarge it.
Yeah, I'm having trouble with that.
But those of you who did not feel like reciting your poem, this is a good way for you to make sure that your poetry is right.
Can you see that?
By emailing it to them.
It's my first initial at last name at QCC, and it's on the booklet. Not my email, but my name. And it's may not be an obvious thing to have to spell out, but you'll see it on the booklet.
Please email Dr. Kuszai your poems. These are really wonderful. And those we didn't hear from especially. With your list of words.
I hope that you will. I really would like that. And I learn a lot from it. And if you have any questions or want to share anything else, I'd like to know about it.
We could kind of keep working, right? We could
Well, that was what we did when I did it in the class. That's what happened. Like I said, I asked the students to remix it with another text, and I let them do anything they wanted. And I suggested things that were related, but I think it would be interesting to do things even that were unrelated to see, what would it be like to remix, apples and oranges. And the two women from the class, I included it in the booklet, remixed it with a section of the Bible about slavery. And I don't know how they found it, but they remixed it so that the words that they found in the text were then mixed with these biblical words. And they wrote a poem back and forth using their phones. And I think if you know anybody in the class, in this group here, and you may or may not, I think that working in groups is interesting. I don't think that this is something that you need to do in isolation. On the other hand, I love that moment of the reclaiming and taking ownership over it, because I think that then says something more about you as you kind of re-enter the text and take over, and not be simply stumbling through a word salad that you may be not even interested in, but using it and taking it seriously and owning it. And again, it may not be like what you would do otherwise, but I would like to see it. I hope you will share it with me. And I know that Carrie would like to present them, and we would talk to you about that, of course. And
let's give a round of applause to Dr. Kuszai. A wonderful workshop. Feedback forms are on your desk. If you take 2 minutes to give your response to what just happened on the feedback forms. Those of you who actually did come up and present, I'll collect your consent forms that it's okay for you to be on YouTube. This event will be uploaded to YouTube, and Dr. Kuszai and I can send you the links. Please share your poems so that we can exhibit them. They're wonderful.